Welcome to episode 240 for Silver Lining for Learning. My name is Punya Mishra. With me are Dede from Harvard, Lydia from Toronto, Yong Zhao from wherever he is, lives in Oregon, works at Kansas and Melbourne, and is flying around the world all the time. So we are lucky to have him here because I think you push off to China tomorrow and then you'll be gone for a few weeks. So it's good to see all of you. We haven't had a host reflect in a while. So I'm not sure how this works anymore. No, I think we do, which is we just pass the baton around and people talk about whatever is on their mind. So with that, I will pass it on. Whoever wants to speak first, what's on your mind? What's going on? There's a lot happening in the AI space, maybe too much. The US government, the White House just released its AI plan, which insisted on free speech and said you cannot talk about DEI and climate change, which is, I guess, one form of free speech. So a lot happening. So I'm sure all of us have strong opinions on all of them. Who wants to jump in first?
Well, since I'm leaving,
All
I
right,
will
Zhao,
jump
it's on
in.
you.
I'm happy to do that. And the first thing, actually, I've stopped working at Melbourne now, so no more Melbourne, and that's good. Update. So,
Oh
but I
no.
was in Australia, recently, but nothing to do with Melbourne anymore. And second thing is that I'm very interested in AI, and I don't think in the White House has a plan, but it has talked about AI. But anyways, the planning is not a big deal, But I'm doing quite a lot. Actually, I'm going to China um, to run a summer camp and principal training and teacher training for about 10 days. And the idea is the theme of all these events is called What's Worth Learning in the Age of AI. So we have students, children, they are 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds from China and Australia. And we have teachers from China and Australia. We have school principals. And we also have speakers from different places. But we're really trying to, in practice, have students explore what is worth learning, to reflect instead of just telling them what's worth learning. If they want to learn something, we have enough AI tools for them to give a try. And they will reflect each day to say, did I have to learn that? And if what did you learn? And could AI help or could AI not help? Because we want to develop a co-evolutionary perspective on AI literacy, so they understand the problems, the issues, the limitations of AI, and also the potential benefits of AI. We want the school leaders to do the same. And we have invited, again, speakers from Canada, US, and Finland, and Australia to speak about this. So I think, a big question we have not reflected enough is what does AI actually do in learning, especially in users' hands? I think we have a lot of, I'm quite surprised how many schools and school systems restrict the use of AI. I think I've been recently doing quite a little bit of research about that too, is that AI is big, but AI is not big in schools. In many, many schools, it's not. But also I'm sorry, I will have not been able to join all the episodes, but from all the various episodes, we hear a lot about AI, but I think AI needs serious rethinking. Does it change the curriculum? Does it change the pedagogy? Does it change methods? Does it change assessment? Does it change school systems? So that's what really I want to get started. Anyone else can follow, and I will jump back in. Thank you.
Thanks, Zhao. Questions, comments, guys?
You are making me the guest. You have
Yep.
questions.
No, because I have comments, but I want to make sure that there is, fairness in terms of what people say.
And I want to go in a little different direction than AI. So why don't Lydia or Punya, why don't you jump in?
All right, Lydia, go ahead.
Sure. Actually, I've been thinking a lot what is worth learning in the age of AI. And one of the thoughts, maybe some of the kids from the summer camp will come to this, hopefully, is the importance of moral education and ethics. And I think AI in some capacity have empowered us in many ways that we can, create things, we can scale things really easily, automate, a lot of mundane tasks. And it's kind of like social media empower people in certain ways that give us a space to voice what we think. But at the same time, that kind of empowerment come with huge responsibility. And when we don't have such empowerment, whatever bad things I say stay in my local circle. But when I have an audience, I don't know, let's say 10,000, 100,000 people, that can do real damage. So I think that same rule of thumb applies to AI. I think AI arguably is probably even more powerful than social media. And combined with social media, I don't even want to imagine if it's in the bad hands, what damage it can do. So I think, we need, I know education, part of moral education is always part of education, but we need to put that in the forefront. And we need good human beings in the world. And then Chris, in Project Zero, there was this project on good project that focus on ethics. And I think these things need to come to the forefront in the age of AI, not just focusing on learning, I don't know, hard, soft skills, these skills, but also learn to be a good human. And that's something that's beyond my mind. And I also think it's really interesting that you're doing this thing, asking kids what is worth learning. Because I don't know, since forever, we always decide what's worth learning and we teach children about those. And then children always ask me, once I've done this, can I have some free time? When I was a teacher, this desire for free time. To be honest, I was the same when I was a student. So I think the yearning to engage in something that they find interesting, passionate about is just common. And I think, hopefully we get to hear more about what happens in your camp when kids decide what's worth learning and what they do. So that's
Well,
my
I can't resist, Lydia, just to add one more thing to that. I think the morality issue and ethics issues also connects to because AI is far away from your local problems. Do people still care about the local community, local problems, local environment? Because it does not have that specificity about where you are, what your life is like, in your social life. So that's another thing I think we hope children may discover. That's actually quite important. When you ask AI, it's written does not written might give you some directions, but written that what's happening there is normally not there. Anyway, just want to add that. Punya, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about when you're talking about AI, are you talking about in general sort of these large language models like ChatGPT or DeepSeek and stuff like that, or are there other forms of AI you're talking about? Because there are so many different, I mean, AI has become this catch-all phrase, for all of these things. While, Siri is AI, Google Photos is AI, Google Maps is AI, whatever, right? It's all over the place. So I'm just curious what you're talking about when you're talking about AI.
So we built an AI tool, basically, and which can hook to any large language models behind. And that tool is following some of my educational thinking. For example, it highlights about personalization. And then second thing is to that tool generates what we call a task chain for them to find and solve problems. Like in the beginning, for example, one event was to say, just discover in which area you might be creative or more creative. So we have them to do research with AI, and but then to connect them to practical things to say, if you think you're good in that, what contribution you can make to other people. So it's like largely language models, but we will also introduce them to mostly generative AI tools for
Okay.
images and for videos or those kind of things.
Okay. I was just curious about that because one of the things that I think it's actually coming back to something you said in the beginning, which is that you see most schools are not. I don't think that schools right now have a choice because if you look at what Google released over the 4th of July weekend during ISTE was 30 different quote unquote AI tools in which are default unlocked. right? So usually when you release an educational tool, it's default locked and the teacher can unlock it. These were like, or admin can unlock it. These were uh, unlocked from the very beginning. And I've been playing around a little bit. I've been reading a little bit about it. And then OpenAI just released its study mode. And turns out, I mean, I just wrote this blog post about, so I was reading 404 Media, which is this company, which, this news company, which looks at tech and stuff like that. And they had one of these things about like how AI is destroying the journalism business. So moment you write a story, there are these AI scrapers that will take your story, rewrite it, and post it in 100 different places. So it's like AI generated slop. So they called it news shaped objects. And I loved that term. So I sort of built on that and I said, what these AI tools create is curriculum shaped objects. They look like curriculum, they sound like curriculum, they feel like curriculum, but they are not really that. They're like, and the thing is that it's the ease of pushing a button and creating like 50 lesson plans, which are differentiated in all those stupid labels that are put on it. And so I'm actually quite happy, like pleased to hear that you're sort of rethinking the foundations of the question, because part of it is the more I play with these tools, the more bizarre they are. They can be really good in certain things, they can be horrifyingly bad in others, and when the subtle differences come up, it's really hard to tell, whether it's actually it's actually making stuff up all the time. Sometimes it aligns with us and other times it doesn't. But I think the question you are asking is different. And I really like that because it's saying, given this, weird alien intelligence, which I think Chris talked about at some point. Like, what does that mean, and how can we use it to navigate sort of the world or make sense of it, and so on? That's a much more valid question. But I would just push back on your initial comment that schools are resisting it. I don't think they might think they are, but it's everywhere right now. And part of the reason I would guess is I am cynical in this. I think that's twofold reason basically is that they don't know what this technology is for. They've made all these claims for it. They pushed it out in the world. They've spent trillions of dollars building the infrastructure and so on. So the only way this technology can get better is if they get more data.
Well,
And they have run through over the internet now. There is nothing left to gain data except from users. So the more they engage you and push you to interact with it, the more data they will get. That's my cynical take on it, which sort of connects back, Lydia, to your point of why social media was pushed on us was not because of any good. It was so that they could get data to sell us things and whatever, right? Engagement was the key. And that's the driving motivation, be pushing it into sort of K-12 and other spaces. You hook people in early, and that's hopefully will pay off to all these money that you have spent on a hype dream, honestly, right? That's my cynical sort of take on it.
well, I think Punya, I just want to self-correct. I think you're absolutely right. I don't mean schools are resisting. I meant really schools because actually, as Lydia was talking about social media's impact and now AI, schools have policies typical to restrict the uses, but that doesn't mean teachers and students don't use them. They use them in a more of a hidden way, and cheating is very on the rise. But again, makes easier to cheat if it's meaningless. The whole thing.
Yeah, the
So
task is
I think
meaningless. Yeah.
that's what. And another just thing we in this camp I want to add one thing is that you have to solve practical problems for other people. So this is another so they are really grounded on problems and to say what are we going to do with this. But anyway, so
No, I love it. I love what you're saying. And I just wanted to highlight that. So I think it's not a question of schools resisting it. I think schools are being steamrolled into it, whether they like it or not, as all of us are. It's a part of Gemini, it's a part of email, it's a part of this, it's Copilot, it's Falana, whatever, right? It's just there. The second thing
it's
I want to
like a
highlight before I
natural heat. It's so hot, you got to dress appropriately. That's what it feels like, right? It feels
yeah,
like we cannot even resist it.
yeah, we cannot even resist it. Seriously,
Yeah.
it's too much money there. The second point I want to make before we move on is something that came up I think in a previous episode when with Mike Sharples and Helen and others, where this thing of that this media is a psychological tool. I think that's where we're going to see the biggest growth in that industry is going to be in things like companionship, therapy, stuff like that. And this goes back, Zhao, to our conversations back in 1999 and 2000 about the media equation and things that way, coming full circle to how we tend to anthropomorphize and we psychologize, and we don't have a choice in that matter. We will do it. And these companies, in their urge to, we already see that in their design, the sycophantic nature and so on, that these are being built in to suck you in. But the big growth is going to be in those replicas and character AIs and those spaces, which will be incredibly damaging, I think, in the long term. Irrespective of what happens in classrooms, it's going to change the social fabric in ways that I don't know we can predict. So those are my sort of couple of quick responses. But I really like the way you're framing this. So, but yeah, thank you.
So I want to go back to the question about what's worth knowing in the age of AI. And what's worth knowing has always had a perennial dimension and an immediate dimension. So perennially, you want to graduate people who can work well with other people. You want to graduate people who can read, have fundamental forms of literacy, and so on. And then immediately, meaning, within kind of a 10-year window, there are special kinds of knowing that appear and disappear. And what AI is interesting, I think, is that the shift in life that AI creates is bigger than most of the other 10-year window things that we've seen. And so the immediate dimension of what's worth knowing is changing. And I think almost all the focus has been on what do people need to know more in order to work with an AI partner, which I think is certainly a valid thing to ask and to consider seriously. But what people aren't talking about is what people need to know less, because AI is going to take it over. And this is the classic education story, right? We're still teaching things that were immediately valuable in the 1700s because nobody ever wants to get rid of anything, right? And if you're a teacher and you're teaching something that's now obsolete, you don't reskill. You just make sure that it stays in the curriculum. And we all know of many, many examples of things that kids are learning that are effectively useless. And yet they're part of the curriculum standards, they're part of the high stakes assessments, they're defended vigorously by the people who benefit from keeping those things in the curriculum. And I think what isn't worth knowing may be as important a question as what is worth knowing.
Chris, I was thinking about, I was trying to write this thing. Like in the 1700s, when we shifted from, the idea of Herbert Spencer talk about what's worth, knowing what's worth learning, and then until the Harvard-led Committee of 10, remember they prescribed practically the curriculum, right? For high school, the 4 years, 4 subjects, and ever since then, 1930s, I bet. I forgot that we have not really touched those 4 things. If you go talk to people to say, well, what's social studies, what's math, you would have a very hard time convincing anybody to say we should get rid of it. I mean, another thing is like again, I really want to highlight that. I want to make sure people understand I'm not objecting to anything yet. I have no evidence, but really, people say Yong Zhao is against literacy. Yes, I'm not against literacy, but if you look at reading, it's a very good example. We've been fighting the reading wars, 26 letters for how many years? And so I just recently wrote an article in the campaign. I was reading I said, probably reading has more to do with politics and money than education. They fought over reading wars. So I think it's a lot of when I think you guys are talking about money, Punya, when you said, who is going to make the most money from this, might matter a lot more than educational ideas. And that's unfortunate because I think the four of us, including Curt Bonk, and none of us is wealthy enough to have any impact in this. But we can keep talking about it. But this is really because it's really funny if you look at schools and how they are interacting with any new technology. There's money, and when there's money, there's a lot of influencers, and the influencers always bring in all sorts of ideas and with fake data, and they will say this is evidence based. So that's what I was really thinking about. The unchangeable things may not have much to do with schools. A lot of people have written about why schools don't change. They may have more to do with society.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Cool. No, I mean, one of the things that I have been writing a decent amount now is that whether or not, there's this quote from Edison, right? That film is going to change education forever and stuff like that, which is always quoted. And then, when we look at, I wrote about social media when it was first coming out, democratization of knowledge, and, the Arab Spring is happening. And I'm like, wow, this is the next Gutenberg revolution. And realizing that if, let's say, you were a person, let's forget even an educator, you were just a person who refused to participate in social media. You never got Facebook, you never got Twitter, you didn't do Instagram, Snapchat, none of the above. It doesn't matter, because you now live in a world that has been dramatically transformed by these technologies. Your individual choice might give you inner peace. That is very possible, right? I mean, who knows, right? But it really does not matter. So that's, I think, a really foundational thing. So coming back to the point you were making, Zhao, about that why schools don't change, that might be a social thing. I think if you look at it the same way, the advent of film, despite Edison's pronouncement, did not change the classroom. What it did do, though, was change the world within which that classroom exists. And so you have, there is no surprise that with the advent of mass media, that you get the rise of independent movement across the world. Because now a person like Gandhi can give a speech on a radio, which can go to millions of Indians who want to resist the British rule. It also allows Rainey Rishpanthal to create movies which will then create the Nazi, fascist movements. So the world is dramatically changed because of it, as with social media, as with television, and so on. I mean, I've joked about, not joked, I mean, it's actually thing. Like if you look at the first radio president in the US would be Roosevelt. The first television president, we would say, would be possibly JFK, and Reagan, of course, mastered it. And Trump is our first social media president. He knows that medium in a way. He understands how that media works on our attention in a way that nobody else does. And to his credit, I mean, for what he has achieved, good or bad, that's where I stand on that. But I mean, so I wonder who's going to be the first AI president. What is that even going to mean? Somebody who can use this technology to manipulate, to change. Uh, I mean, you look at what the interesting thing Grok has been doing recently. Suddenly it goes like, calls itself Mecha Hitler, and it starts manipulating news and ideas because it's anti-woke. I mean, you have 5 or 6 people who are controlling the outputs of these technologies, and they're doing it in a ham-handed way, but they'll get better. They will get better at it, and we won't even know that we are being manipulated, in subtle ways. So those are the kinds of things that really, really worry me about this technology. Um, at some level, it has really empowered me. I have an example right here on my desktop. So you may not, many of you, some few of you may not know, but like my mother was a writer. Zhao's met her. She was a writer. She wrote 17 books. I have all her books. I can read only one of them because she wrote in the native language of Odia. And it's always been a dream of mine to learn Odia. and I couldn't find the right tools and so on. So I built my own using Claude. I have on my window right here a thing that gives me Odia words and phrases, and I keep practicing learning the script. And I finally, 2 days ago, read the first lines of a poem my mother had written, of a book that she had written, and I realized, I didn't even know this, she had dedicated the book to her grandkids, to my kids. I didn't even know that because I couldn't read it. And so this technology is incredibly empowering in individual ways. It's the social that I worry about. And I'm just curious to hear from others what you think about this sort of back and forth between sort of the individual, the small. I mean, one of the things SLL has been doing a really good job of is capturing these examples of local innovations, of people who are doing interesting work in the interstices of this madness. And I have come to believe that that is actually one of the best things that we do in the show, is we capture those stories. Lydia, you've gotten some great examples. Collectively, we have had so many great examples over the years. And I wonder what you think about this tension between these broader social pressures and society and the economic structure we live in, and these sort of little pockets of resistance and humanity that seem to be emerging and that we seem to celebrate in our show. I've talked a lot. I'm going to keep quiet now for a while. Thoughts?
Well, I'll just say something quick about silver lining from learning, and then I would like to hear more from Lydia. When we started Silver Lining for Learning at the beginning of COVID, it was a period in which everyone became a first responder, because there was no aspect of life that wasn't not only touched by COVID, but menaced by COVID. And now here we are, 5.25 years later, and we've now again entered a period where every stakeholder in education is a first responder, because the level of chaos, danger, turbulence, uncertainty is as high as it was in COVID, but more directed, which makes it more dangerous, unless you agree with the direction that's being put forward, because the virus at least was sort of random in its effects, and now there's a definite purpose behind all the chaos and turbulence and so on. And I think that one of the things that Silver Lining for Learning was when we started it was a kind of a lighthouse. And part of what we said to people was, yes, other people are also frightened and troubled and concerned with what's happening, but we can find points of light where people who aren't overwhelmed by what's going on, and who stay student-centered, and who don't worry about what they don't have, but focus on what they do have, can do wonders with low resources, but innovative approaches. And now I think part of the role of Silver Lining for Learning is similar, to say again, stay focused on students, as the innovators that we feature do. Don't worry about what you don't have, because in many cases, the innovations we're highlighting are done with resources far below what people are wringing their hands about and saying, well, this isn't enough. And, become part of a larger community that supports one another and that works towards the kind of goals that this program espouses. So here we are again, I guess, would be my sense about what's happened. And it may be that 5 years from now, if I'm still around and on the program, we'll be hitting another cycle. Just seems to be part of life in the 21st century.
So building on Chris and Punya, what you said, I think I will comment using my most recent experience trying to build these shorts of silver lining for learning to reach more people and audience for us. I absolutely agree. I think silver lining for learning, we are kind of the people, the innovations we feature, I think they are like these small pockets, beacons of hope that really deeply understanding that education is human-centered. It is contextualized. There's no easy solution to quickly scale a magic across the board. And these educators deeply understand that, and they are doing the groundwork. And so being such a beacon of hope, I was thinking, how can we amplify our voice in such like a noisy social media platform? So I've been like creating these shorts, posting them across the board and trying to like thinking about how do these algorithms work? How can we get more views? Have some success and some failure. So I guess it's try and error. But to be honest, before this week, I wasn't deeply engaged with social media apart from using LinkedIn to look at other scholars' work and their posts. I'm more of on the side, like Punya, you were saying, like I turned this off to have my peace of mind and for my own mental health. I have to say my mental health suffered to extent for these experiments, but what I start to come to realization also related to what you said about how these technology, the social media platform or AI is fundamentally shaping our world, how we interact with others. And it's transforming everything we do. And I realized that a way to amplify our voice, to reach more audience, some ways we have to use these social media platforms. There's so much, bad stuff out there, but how can we amplify good stuff? And in some ways, I feel like I was kind of forced to not have a choice but to engage with these platforms. And then in some ways, I have to gain this platform somehow to get more people to listen to us, to listen to our voice. And among this, a lot of, I don't think very productive voices. So I started thinking like, in the school, the easiest way with these technology is like to ban it, to not engage with it. And to extent, I think in certain age, I do think it's probably the best not for very young children to engage with these screens. And I think that's seen in like Silicon Valley, these tech giants, they don't let their young kids engage with these platforms and the technology they created. So I think that says ample. But at the same time, we do have to kind of educate ourselves, our kids, to navigate this very turbulent sea. And I think I would like to think of this technology as like a very turbulent sea, and we are these ships, we have to sail. And then, but how do we uphold a moral compass while we sail in this very turbulent ocean? I think that's what education is about. Yes, I agree, absolutely. We can't avoid it, and we'll keep on experimenting with this social media. Let's see if we can get 1 hour videos have more views. But I have to say, we did reach more audience, and there are people like who've never engaged with us of discovering us. So that's the one positive side.
When Punya was talking about this, the power of the tool, I was just thinking about Punya many years ago when we were at Michigan State University. You said, when I left United States, go back my home in my village in Sichuan province, China. It's like a 5,000 years of journey. I don't know if you remember that, but it's true. At that time, that was, God, many, many years ago. Because I was thinking about my village. So when Lydia was talking about schools, you're basically talking about we're in the attention economy. Whoever wins the attention wins the whole game. So everybody's trying to fight for other people's attention. So like in my village, I just read, like now I can read news about my village. I mean, it's impossible, right? And it's all random, And what happened? They just closed the elementary schools and middle schools. Everybody's moving to the county. They want the kids. And as somebody did a social media, said, why? Because they want people to buy houses in the city. And then say they want to basically destroy the villages. So there's no school. What are you gonna do? And then but these kids at the same time, they're using their smartphones on AI, on whatever tool. But teachers has control of their formal attention time. So this is Another thing, Punya, when you said something, I was really interested. It's kind of connects to Chris talking about first responders. It's like how dangerous it is. You know, when people could hear on radio from Gandhi, but Gandhi at least he was a nice guy in some sense. So, but at the same time, you can hear the same from Hitler. You know, right now, you know, it's like the media. For example, China probably has the largest number of monitoring cameras on every person. China, I think, largest percentage. So AI is used to largely really drive government control of people. You know, it's like you know, when I enter China, I would assume no privacy, just basically whatever I say. You know, and now actually in the U.S. too. Remember U.S. now, if you want to get a U.S. visa, your social media will be, I don't know, Chris, if you know this. This is most recent. Your social media history will be reviewed. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
not by people. It's some AI tools. So at the same time, you know, Punya, we're talking about democratizing. You know, we all had this idea, but at the same time, you know, social control is the same thing. But also, this is beyond the 6 people or 5 people who controls AI, who basically whatever tool we're using are released by really a few people
Yeah.
who say, you know, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. So this, I think, is a very complex. And Lydia, I'm very thankful for what you're trying to do to compete in the attention media. You know, here we have 5 great people speaking the best words, but nobody pays attention to us. But you know, but this is, but everybody now
Yeah.
thinks they
It's
have
the
great
5 best
ideas.
people.
I know everybody think, you know, other than that, how many short videos are there on TikTok, on social media, all the shorts? Because everybody must think they all have great ideas. Otherwise, why would they want to share them? You know, a
For
great
sure.
body, a great idea. So this is a time to fight for the attention of students to listen to Lydia, Punya, Chris, Curt, and Yong Zhao. But it's very difficult.
It is. No, I really like what you said about that schools have a monopoly over attention for a certain amount, or at least they think they do, you know, over attention for a certain period of time. But there is a much larger sort of ecosystem within which they exist, which sucks the attention in different kinds of ways. So yeah, I know it's a really, really interesting conundrum. And you're right. I mean, like we 5 don't have a prerogative over the best ideas. You know, we think we
So
do, but you know,
so I'm old enough to remember a book called Future Shock.
yes, I remember that.
Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, which
Yep,
sort of leaped to the top of the charts and stayed there for months. And Toffler was actually a reporter. He wasn't, you know, a deep academic expert. And his fundamental message was that we'd reached some kind of a tipping point where things were now changing so rapidly that we had lost control of our ability to keep up with them. And all that we could do would be to sort of hang on tight to the roller coaster and see where we went. Now, today, Toffler's pace of change is so glacial compared to the pace of change now. You know, it's like reading something in hieroglyphics inside of a pyramid to compare what Toffler thought was fast to where we are today. And we're being manipulated through that speed. I mean, now, if you say, what is the policy? There's 5 policy changes a day. You know, you have to turn on the news to find out what the new flip is in the policy, knowing that 2 hours from now there's going to be another flip, and so why pay much attention to it? And that is part, that churn, which is deliberate, I think, is part of the challenge that we face in this battle for attention. Is to say, you have to be able to look deeply inside of these things, because if you just pay attention to the surface characteristics, all that you're going to see is some kind of, you know, hodgepodge of stuff.
Chris, I just want to build on to what you said, this like really unprecedented speed with everything, like, and versus like the importance of, really digesting something, understanding something, thinking something deeply. And I'm really worried, like right now, like, we're under the pressure of like constantly keeping up with things, consuming things, and feeding papers into Notebook LM to get a quick gist of what's happening. Like instead of listening to a podcast, a copy paste URL again, like to some kind of AI to give me a quick digest to keep like pace. And then, these things I feel AI to a degree has really accelerated this information processing. We're trying to process as much as we can, but at the same time, like there's not much thinking, there's not much learning, there's no like really any kind of active meaningful learning in there. So in some ways, I'm really worried that learning to extent will be forced into something like kids will be forced to process, and we are to extent already forcing to process as much as we can. But in the end of the day, like you sit down, you like, it's kind of like watching shorts. You don't really know what you're watching the past hour. You don't know what you've read in the past hour. And I think that's deeply concerning because I think that's something really deeply concerning.
So can and I agree that, that we do seem increasing to be living in a post-fact world, but that's why I want to circle back to, I think, what Zhao sort of talked about, why these project the students do, you have to touch on a real problem. That's when all the BS that you have generated in your head will get tested. That's when, if you think you understood the Pythagorean theorem in order to measure out a space or whatever it may be, guess what? If you didn't understand it, the thing that you will design, the chicken coop that you will design, will not hold up. And I'm just making up an example, but there is a reason why we have calculus and why we have differential equations and why we develop the laws of physics and so on and so forth, because they help us sort of control, predict the real world. And I think that very often what school, by divorcing that learning because of the infinite wisdom of the elders who say you need to learn X, Y, and Z, deny the students that experience of figuring out for themselves. If you want to solve a real, genuine problem in the world, there, I am quite confident that you will butt yourself against real issues of mathematics and data representation and the errors that can happen if you don't represent data correctly and the inferences that you make. And so that to me is where the rubber meets the road, where the reality happens, right? Where all the stuff in here now bumps against the real world, and you start recognizing the value of certain things, that, oh, I need to understand X if I truly have to solve this problem. So just one last thought. I mean, a lot of this talk around personalization and so on with AI, I think just misses the boat, because it's personalization for what reason? Because of the goals that I set for you. You need to be able to understand, whatever the quadratic equation and how to resolve it, right? I decided that. The quadratic equation didn't emerge from something that you were doing. So anyway,
Punya, no, what you said is quite interesting, because there's a big study out of I think Yale, MIT, a big group of them saying that people who use the AI don't remember what they wrote as essays. People use their mind, remember, and had more ownership of essays. But what you said really means something, is that they're basically conclude AI makes people lazy. But that's not the case. If you want to write an essay not as assignment, that's a very different job. If you want to write something for a purpose to somebody, rather than let's write something, I think that's dramatic and different. Another thing I think, Pune, you said really got me to think about is film did not change schools, but change the society in which schools exist. So like when Lydia was talking about there and Chris, the top I remember the Chinese translation of Future Shock. It's it's again, Lydia is too old for you, but it was in the 1980s. It was a long time ago. And I was really thinking about
I just have to
today.
say 1980s was not a long time ago.
Well, that's a lot. Well, God, you know. But if you think about this, Punya,
I'm kidding.
good way. So that's what education is fundamentally social. You teach kids to react to a society that technology has shaped. But we have actually not done that. You know, going back to what Chris was talking about, you know, what is the immediate, you know, worth learning thing? You know, we have not touched that. If you look at American schools today, I mean, it's outdated from since 1980s, maybe even before that, because we didn't even try to teach students about how the society has changed, how jobs have changed. You know how we never taught kids about social media. We just they had to deal with it. We never. But again, the people who try to teach them are not the first users. Do you remember this thing? Like we are not the first users. We are old. So the first users don't even get a chance to deal with that. So this is a very interesting process. If the film has changed so much and TV has changed society so much, but we really did not do that. We add a course, we don't get rid of any courses. We add a media course, media studies. Remember that, Chris? And when television become popular, remember what's the company put TV in the classroom? Every classroom that have a TV, I don't think they turn on much, but we use that. A lot of the TV becomes in essence a broadcasting system if a principal has something to say, but it costs a lot of money. But really, there was really not much of anything. So like AI came up. I remember actually even under Obama says in coding for all. Remember that time? It's just really very fascinating to see how we respond by keep adding tiny things. Even if you think about computers, since the 1980s, we've been teaching computers first of how to hold a mouse, remember how to hold a keyboard, and how to do typing, then word processor. It's really interesting. Schools have a very easy way to resist big changes and with tiny changes. If you want to say that, oh, we are doing that, we've done that. We have the TV in the classroom. I really love that idea, the TV in the classroom project, and it's just fast. Chris, tell us a little bit more about the television in the classroom. I'm sure you know that better than anybody.
Well, I think that the more recent example actually is the smart boards. That
Yeah.
you just weren't an educator if you didn't have a smart board. And within a period of about 1 year, the smart boards went from the highlight of the school to skeletons locked away in the closets. And we just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. It's really, I don't know.
So I want to ask you guys, Chris and Punya and Lydia, your speculation of that mistake. Why do we make those mistakes? So I'm thinking about somebody has to control the money and somebody has to invest the money. So why is that? And that is almost like a pandemic, Chris. When you mentioned about COVID, it is somehow something new will pop over and spread really fast, and then become outdated.
Well, my example would be it's like losing weight. We know how to lose weight. You exercise more and you eat less, but that's hard. And so every day there's a new magic way to lose weight. You get this injection, or you take this pill, or you eat nothing but earthworms or whatever. And these fads go on and on and on endlessly. And people will buy into the fad because it means that they can avoid tough reality, that if they really want to lose weight, they're going to have to pay some dues. I think education and learning are the same way. We know how to help kids learn, and it's hard. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes money. So it's much easier to say, well, where's the magic? Where's the magic device? Or where's the magic software? Where's the magic whatever that's going to make it easier? And we have fat people and dumb kids because we don't confront the realities of what's really happening.
By the way, Chris, I have to tell you, as a person, first part of my life is trying to add weight, and second part of my life, suddenly I had to lose weight. It was both are very difficult. The first part actually was much harder because there's nothing to eat. You could not even add any weight. I was 37 kilograms when entered college. The first year, I couldn't even get into college because physically I wasn't qualified. But anyway, but now I have to watch losing weight, and it's a fascinating way to think about how we suddenly everybody in this country has to worry about losing weight. It's I
Well,
think.
I'll tell you this, one never loses it. You'll always find it. You might try to lose, but you'll find it again. So that's one of those things that never gets lost.
Anyway, go on, Lydia, you gotta say something
Lydia,
about
your thoughts.
I think an- another aspect might be like fear of missing out and also appearing less innovative compared to your counterparts. If this school next door bought smartboard, if you don't have them, you look like you're outdated, you're not innovative, so you're pressured to buy this. I think we say the same thing with the AI adoption now. Like we, especially with this like really platform-based adoption, like we need to buy X, Y, Z AI. I wouldn't name those platforms here, but do we need to buy this AI platform? A lot of school, like whenever we run a PD program, school ask us like which platform should we buy. But because platform, as Chris said, is an easy way to show that you've done something that your innovative school, but the deep work is actually human capacity building, which is hard and slow and involves a lot of energy and commitment. So, but then school feel if the other school body, if we don't have it, we appear bad. And there's another layer. And I think these technology firms know that really well. So that's how they grow really fast in a very short period of time without building a really thoughtful product.
Yeah, so one of the things I think is I wrote this post recently about this curriculum shape objects, and one of the things I said about education is that the sort of edge cases are endless. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding by thinking that you can get this one tool, one device, one technique, talking about reading, like do phonics, do this, do that, and it's going to solve the problem for all, right? That the edge cases are it's sort of infinite in some way, or endless if you're educators in front of a group of 30 kids. You don't have a uniform body of humans sitting there. They're all different from each other, and each requires, and I think that when we try to come up with one-shot thing, saying this is going to fix it, that just misses the point about the true nature of the activity that we're involved in, right? And if we want to address that, because there's no way one human can, so you not start have to thinking in a different way altogether, which is then the role of the educator becomes somewhat different than imparting knowledge to sort of being a conductor, sort of leading this orchestra of each of these instruments doing their own thing and growing and developing in their own way, which is what I think, coming full circle back to what Zhao started with, what he is thinking of doing. If I can phrase it like, describe it that way, that's what you're trying to do, which is recognize the fact that these edge cases are endless. And that if you see AI as creating this curriculum shape object that you can then slap on these 30 kids, that's the wrong way of thinking about it, right? But if you let the 30 kids engage and say, okay, what's scaffolded, of course they don't have the possibly the knowledge structures or the self control or whatever the case may be. You have to scaffold it. I get that. So that's, I think, part of what I'm thinking about why these things happen, sort of. It's like just a misunderstanding of what teaching and learning is.
I just
I
want
mean,
to add to what
yeah.
Lydia was talking about. Technology company knows what schools wants. Of course, they have marketing, but I also think there are a lot of educational researchers help with that. And Chris, again, you would have a lot more experience. Knowing there are a lot of people who somehow, when they saw one technology, I mean, educational technology researchers, they would promote that technology, think that's the best thing, like Punya, right? I mean, they would think this one thing is going to revolutionize everything. And so there's writings, so that helps schools to say, oh my God, this is the thing, we will do something. And there's no one thing. Actually, recently I was writing a book. I just finished the book, and I talked a lot about, I was bringing data to say, does social and emotional learning work? No, it doesn't work for everybody. It works, with a fix as a 0.2 or something, maybe somebody. And like with Punya, I remember on this show, we talked a little bit about, does growth mindset work? For somebody, as for others, learning to quit might be more important. Just that's why I said, growth mindset can be simple stupidity, for example. So I think there's nothing truly works for all people, but we like to prescribe the same thing for everybody. We're running out of time. We got to bring Chris back to summarize, and but anyway, we got enough things to talk about.
No, this was fun. Thank you. So, Chris, what are we doing next week?
So next week, we are actually recording the show on Thursday, but it'll probably be released again on the weekend. And it is about the education of girls in Africa, and an initiative that has a new model that is powerful and spreading rapidly. We'll have the developer of the initiative. We'll have one of the girls who graduated, who's now part of the initiative. And I think, again, it's another exciting global South transformative innovation that's taking place with small amounts of resources, but large amounts of insight. So we're excited to feature that being released roughly a week from today.